What's up, everybody? Guru here. Thanks for joining me on a special edition of #Guru Friday, where I answer all of your coaching and teaching questions. On today's episode, I'm joined by my CGA staff, my junior golf director, staff instructor, Seth Mers, which you can reach him on the Twitter at SethMersGolf, and my other staff instructor, Robbie Fales, which you can reach him on Twitter and Instagram at RobFalesGolf. So it's great to be joined by my boys as we talk a little bit of golf and answer some questions. So we've got a really good question from a young man that plays college golf, that we won't mention where that is, about personal development and becoming a little bit more of a people person that I answer. So I get a little bit more in depth about my career and sort of where I've come from. And there's so many more book ideas that I didn't mention that I will hook up in the show notes when I get a chance, or feel free to send me a email or a DM if you have any more questions. And I've got tons of book ideas, podcast ideas as well. But just really excited about this episode as we sort of switch gears a little bit from the long interview format into a sort of a Q&A with myself, and then you get to hear from my boys that I'm super proud of. So hit those guys up on social media and tell them how good they did, and we've got a couple really good questions and topics that we discuss here that you don't want to miss. So sit back, enjoy. You may want to get a pad and a paper out to write down some of the things that we discuss, or listen multiple times. But feel free to share this episode and really continue to pour out my thanks, and I really appreciate all the downloads and everybody listening to the show. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to my conversation with my boys on Guru Friday. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Guru Friday. We haven't done one of these in a while. I'm really excited today. We've got some great questions and some good topics. And thank you so much for joining us. And when I say us, I've got the staff in the house today. Say hello. Got Robbie and Seth.
How we doing, guys? How's it going?
So glad to have Robbie Fales and Seth Mers in the house today with Guru Friday. And we've got some good questions. It's going to be more of a discussion type of podcast today as well. I'm going to get into one great question on personal development that I got from a young man, and then we're going to talk a little bit more technical, some teaching stuff, and then just kind of see where it goes, right? So these are always fun to do a little brainstorming and hashtag training, almost like our Tuesday training as well, right? So we can kind of get some dialogue going, which we tend to do in our training sessions. So, Robbie, if you want to go ahead and read the first question, that would be great.
Absolutely. So, hello, Mr. Sutton. I'm a college golfer, and I've listened to your podcast with Scott Fawcett about 10 times the past month or two. Can't honestly get enough of it because you two combine the things I love most, golf and self-development. I love Tony Robbins. I'm a psychology major, and just like you, where I have been very shy and introvert, but would love to become a people person and serve others. So I wonder what your best book tip would be to improve my shyness and value serving others more than myself.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I wanted a little more context from this young man, and I actually did a little research and found out where he played, and I'm not going to share that with everybody, but he came back very, very quickly with a great response, because I just wanted to kind of know where his goals were going forward and why he, asked the question. So here's his response.
The main reason I'm in college golf here in the States is because I want to play professionally, and I believe this was the best way to go. I've improved a lot during my first 2 years and have some high goals for the upcoming 2. My vision is to help people in need through charity work with the opportunities that come with being a successful professional golfer. I feel like becoming more of a people person is required to fulfill that vision, so that this is a big goal of mine. My golf dream is to be the most consistent player on the PGA Tour, win a major championship, and play the Ryder Cup, beating the U.S.
Yeah, we'll overlook that last piece, right? Since we're all Americans here. But a great question, and I think we have different backgrounds, obviously, and different goals. When I was coming up through college, and then when I turned professional, I was not going to play the tour. So, but I think what we're talking about here is improving communication skills. That's the big thing, and I'll just sort of give the listeners, and I know they've heard me talk briefly about sort of my background and what he's referring to. If you did listen to that episode with Scott, is I was a very shy young man. I was very. It wasn't that I wasn't outgoing with my friends. It was more when I was in a social setting, or even when I got my first assistant's job. I talk about this all the time in my presentations. Is I was nearly fired because I was afraid to speak to people. I was just very, very backwards. My wife likes to tell the story that I was afraid to speak into the drive-through window at McDonald's. That's how she would have to order for me. So, there was a lot of work to do back in Seth, you got the opposite problem, right? So you never had trouble speaking to people. Your personality is really one of your strong suits.
You've been trying to shut me up for 2 years now.
That's right. Yeah, and then Robbie's probably a little bit more like me, right? So very much I would call myself back in a deep thinker, very like to listen, observe. But a lot of times that can be perceived as I was called uppity, stuck up. That people just get this misperception of like who you really are because you're so introverted. And I think those qualities can be very beneficial in a lot of situations. And as I've gotten older, I've obviously changed and started to make those things more of a strength and more. But sort of backtracking is, to get sort of to the question, I've got some great book ideas, and I'm going to talk about some of the books that I've read coming up. But I remember when I first started working at Dana Rader, after I got out of the head pro business and decided that I wanted to teach full time, I sat down and did my goals. And I'd do that every year, sit down and sort of scratch out some things that are going to keep me focused and keep me moving in the right direction. And I always wanted to be a top teacher. I mean, I think probably every teacher that teaches full time says, hey, I want to be on the top 100 list. And those things change. I think as you get older, it didn't become as important to me when I shifted my mindset a little bit. But that was my aspiration, my ambition. So looking back at that, and I remember like it was yesterday, me and Dana having a discussion because she was very influential in my career and helping me sort of get out of my shell and become more of a people person. Is she just said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a top teacher. I want to be the best I can be. And then I want to have the respect of my peers. And she's like, well, what do you think that entails? And I said, well, I watch you give presentations in front of groups. I've seen her speak in front of large crowds, and I said, I don't have that. I know I don't have that skill. So it was something that I was terrified to get in front of 5 people and give a presentation on chipping. Much less get up in front of hundreds of people and do a 2-hour talk like I'm doing now. So that's sort of where it started. It's almost like facing your fears is what drives you in the direction that if not, then I knew I just wasn't going to be successful, right? So it was more than just presentation skills. It was communication skills, right? And it was starting to develop that EQ that we talk a lot about, or the curiosity about people and other people. That was very important. So prior to going to Dana's, kind of getting back to that story of almost getting fired at my first assistant pro job, I had to have a little self-reflection and say, what's going on here? Obviously, I've got a problem, and I don't know if somebody gave me the book or I just sort of started seeking answers. And this was, right about when the internet came out. But books were really the way to sort of learn things, is to go grab something and try to figure out the answers. So How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie was the first book that I read that sort of revolved around personal development or self-development. And, the big thing that I learned from that book was how important it was to be more interested in others and then sort of get out of the ego that we all have inside of us. So, going through when I started working at Dana's, and I'm going to get to the other book ideas here as well, but when I started working at Dana's, and I think this is what I talked with Scott about Fawcett, was, once I started becoming more successful, I guess. I mean, I don't even know if you can use the word success when, 3 or 4 years into teaching full time, even though I'd been teaching quite a few years out. Before that, I felt like I was really starting to come into my own, and you start getting nominated for awards and, people start saying nice things about you. It's real easy to get caught up in thinking that you're better than you are. And that's a big, big trap. I think that all of us need to worry, to be careful of. There's always that one person around the corner that's going to stump you and show you that you don't know everything. So that was sort of the thing that triggered me into saying, all right, I need to take a hard look at myself and say, one, I don't know everything. And two, I need to stop complaining about the things that I'm not getting or my situation or whatever was going on at work. And I need to start figuring out how I can help other people and how to help my coworkers get better and how to help, it goes through your entire life, right? I mean, how to be a better father, a better husband, the whole thing. So that's sort of, it's a mindset change, I think, that really kicked in, and this was my early 30s, and I love I think the quote that really resonated me from Jim Rohn is, for things to change around you, you must change, right? And the mindset of serving others completely flipped my entire life. And it's not a self-serving attitude at all, right? So that's the thing that I want to get across from this message is it's not a you don't do nice things for other people to get things back, right? So you do things because it's the right thing to do, and absolutely, and that's what you want to do for other people, because you have that empathy and you have that sort of heart, and you're right in the right place. So that's a big thing, because one of my favorite quotes from Zig Ziglar is, "You will get all that you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want." And again, it's not a self-serving situation. It's just a matter of doing the right thing, because the right thing is always the right thing. I think Gary Vee says that all the time, right? The other favorite, one of my other favorite ones from Zig Ziglar is failure is an event, not a person, right? So you've kind of got to have that mindset right off the bat. So after that sort of flipping the switch, as I would say, it started to occur, is when I started really, it's amazing when you start seeking something, you'll find it if you want it bad enough. So the passion was lit for me with trying to be a better version of myself. And at that time, the internet was just cranking up. I mean, it was 10 years into it, I guess. It was early 2000s. So I had illegally burned a lot of programs, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, the Weekend Seminar. And I think you can find all these things now on iTunes, which is really cool. You just got to pay for them. They're not free anymore, but they're all still available out there. I had Napoleon Hill live. I had Brian Tracy. I mean, there's so many. So the Dale Carnegie book was kind of the first, and then that's when I sort of met Tony Robbins. I haven't been to a live event, but I've done all his programs. Literally got the workbooks, sat down, did the goal workshops, and all the audio stuff. I called it Automobile University is what Zig Ziglar called it. So I figure I got a couple degrees in that, because I literally set a goal to listen to at least an hour of information that is going to help me be a better person, or be better at my job, or be a better, just at life for, I mean, it was at least 3 to 4 years. I was just ferocious at this deal. And I would take notes, and that's when I started my journals and whatnot, which everybody knows about. So Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within is a great book that he wrote, and I think he has an audio program on that as well. Jim Rohn, which was Tony Robbins' mentor, which was kind of cool when I listened to Jim Rohn, and then Tony actually brought up that he was sitting in a Jim Rohn seminar when he was 19 years old, changed his life, and then look where he's at now. The 12 Pillars was, I think, the latest of Mr. Rohn's books. The 5 Major Pieces to the Life Puzzle was really good, and then he has programs built around these as well that I think you can find online. And then the Weekend Seminar, which was a seminar that he would do that sort of put all of it together. It's fantastic. And then one of the books that really, I'd say, had a big effect on me was Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill. And I almost consider that the first. It was almost like the Bible of self-development. It was written in 1937, and it's a really interesting story. And a lot of this stuff isn't applicable. I mean, but again, anytime you read a book, you're gonna just pick 2 or 3 things out that you like, and then maybe you discard other things, and that's okay. I'm just kind of telling you my path that I took, and that's where I came up with the term mastermind crew, which is the people that I decide to surround myself with. I call my mastermind crew, which is the people that push me and the people that support me, from your family to your friends to your colleagues. That's in the book, in Napoleon Hill's book. And then, recently Gary Vaynerchuk had a huge effect on me just from a social media and branding standpoint. I think it's his stuff is fantastic. I want Crush It, which he wrote in 2008, really gave me the blueprint to sort of start my social media campaign with YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and starting my blog. And anything he's got, several books out there. Thank You Economy, Jab Jab Right Hook, hashtag Ask Gary V, and then his latest book, Crushing It, that is finished, is really good. So it's kind of updated version now of Crush It, which you can't go wrong there. Because really what this young man's doing, even though you're going to be a professional golfer, he's got to start creating his brand, right? So anytime when you start, when you turn pro, you're your own company, and that's going to be your brand. So the better you can public speak, the better you can, like I love the charity idea. I mean, he's thinking this kid's a junior in college.
He's going to be successful.
He's going to be great. Yeah, he's already got the mindset that I had when I was 30. Okay, and the kid's 20 years old. Yeah. So he's way ahead of the game just by asking these questions. I think he's going to start to be a people person. But the thing is, you got to get out there and put yourself into positions where you're uncomfortable. That's what I would tell him is the first thing I did when I knew that I was completely horrible at public speaking is I went and took a class. So I took Toastmasters, which is a national public speaking class, and there's others out there now. I did some research last night, just kind of see. I just Googled, classes, and they're in every city where you can go. There's free public speaking classes, and they're even online, right? So, even if you're not reading books, like Rob obviously doesn't like to read, you can get audiobooks, in your car or as you're walking to class, you can listen to stuff like that.
Podcasts are good.
Yeah, now it's podcasts, right? So the podcasts are basically have sort of replaced a lot of because all we're doing is we're trying to save time. A podcast is a way to consume content. And that's what I do. Now my automobile university is I listen to podcasts in the morning. I listen to podcasts on the way back from work and try to catch up with all the information. And I'm not going to go on every single podcast I listen to, but I've got a pretty big list. Let's see what else. I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, I mean, just asking questions, and that's the big thing I've learned by doing this podcast is I've improved my communication skills by crafting and developing better questions so I can get better answers. Because I mean, that's the thing is when I'm interviewing my guests, I'm just trying to learn stuff for myself, and I figure, if that's a good place to start, and everybody else is going to be interested in that. So I hope that helps. It just kind of gives you a roundabout, and it gives you a little bit of transparency of my career. Like I said, I've come a long way, and I'm proud of sort of what I've done, but it's been a lot of work. Okay, I mean, I read a lot of Presentations Plus by David Peoples. This is one of the books that I used to go to when I was trying to develop speaking presentations. And everybody, I think, prepares differently. I spent a lot of time in the mirror, talking and filming myself, and recording myself, and that's the hardest thing. Because I mean, every time I watch a presentation, when I started doing the Guru workshops, I'd always film them. One, that I wanted to have the information from the other coaches, selfishly, but two was just to critique my performance, and I hate watching it every time.
Cringeworthy.
Oh, I hate it. It's just like because I pick, I'm picking apart. But I guess that's that's a good thing. But so that's sort of where I went. I was trying to think anything else.
So for the teachers out there,
yeah.
I want to kind of unpack what we just heard, because I always enjoy listening from experts. And I don't know exactly what the definition of an expert is, but if anyone's an expert on professional development, it's Jason.
Yeah, no question.
So the big things that I took away from what I just heard that we can take to our students is, the first and foremost, he was self-aware of what his strengths and his weaknesses were. He didn't try to block out what he didn't like about himself. He looked at it head on. And I think a lot of our students, a lot of times, will, if we ask them, okay, what's your strength and what's your weakness, we can't assume that they're always going to give us the correct answer to that question. So you need to take a deep dive into what is actually going on, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. The second thing is, he got absolutely obsessed with what he was trying to change. And a lot of times that cannot be understated, the importance of that. Whenever I'm trying to learn something, or whenever Seth's trying to learn something, I know that we just get absolutely obsessed by it. And I think that's something that all high performers end up doing, is that if they figure out something they want to get better at, they get obsessed by it. The third is that he ran towards fear, not away from it. So a lot of things biologically that has allowed our species to survive is this little part of our brain called the amygdala. And so basically what happens is that over time, if we are in the presence of fear, we are programmed biologically to run away from it. But oftentimes when it comes to learning and motor learning and learning a new skill, it's actually extremely helpful to run towards the fear as opposed to away from it.
Yeah.
The last thing that I wanted to say is that understand that real changes take time. I mean, he worked on this thing for 3 years, and our students expect to get better in a 30-minute lesson. So that's something that I think.
Well, it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. I'm not there yet. Like I said, I just bought 2 books on presentations yesterday because I'm still not satisfied.
You're still not satisfied.
Yeah. I mean, I got a lot of work to do, but the one thing I will throw out there, because one of my weaknesses is balance a lot of times, because when I get going head on to something, a lot of times I start neglecting other things. So that's something I'm working on too. But as I was telling you, guys are young, you're not married yet, right? You don't have to, but you got to get it while you can. But then you got to obviously, have balance and make sure you don't go overboard.
Right.
And start.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, for sure. That's I appreciate that. That's very good insight. Anything you can share there, Seth? Because like I said, you've sort of got the gift of. I mean, you have such a great personality, and which is why you're going to, be such an awesome teacher, because you have a little bit of both. Talk to us a little bit about, why do you think that is? Is it something in your childhood? Is it something maybe was taught? Or you think it's more of an innate skill?
I would probably say somewhat innate. I've always been much of a talker, been more of the social one of the class clown growing up, younger brother of 2. And, I would just say, going back to your point of balance, that would be the next step for me. Something that I tend to do is, if I'm working on something kind of like what Robbie talked about, we're working on something we obsess with, that we lose that balance. And there's so many times I see myself, even in the position that I'm at as junior golf director, with 110 kids in junior golf each week, and then PGA Junior League, and then also trying to pay attention to students and stuff like that. Time management is so crucial for the point that we're at. And that's what I'm working on in my own career over the next, several years, that I think is most important for me to improve on is time management, because it's so easy to neglect certain areas of our life, even outside of work.
Yeah.
I mean, I find myself working 60 hours a week, and then all of a sudden I'm not talking to my friends and family anymore. It's like, right. so much of that is so important to keep a sanity, within yourself, to figure out the proper balance of not only work and social life, but work, within itself, trying to figure out the proper way to make sure you're paying attention to all your students while still paying attention to keeping your social life healthy and all that sort of stuff is very important.
And keeping yourself healthy.
Yeah, well, that's the next thing is that, during the winter I'm in the gym. I think I went to the gym, like I had a 3-month stretch where I went to the gym 20 days in a month, and I don't think I've been to the gym in 3 months now.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's finding that proper balance and keeping it going year round as well. It's not just seasonal.
It's habits, man. It's like it's just building habits, and that's where I learned so much from Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, was just creating momentum with small changes. And I can't tell you guys enough, because I've gone through several times in my life where I get out of shape, or I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing, and it's like, you don't let your health get in the way of your goals.
Yeah.
Right?
That's familiar.
It's really, yeah. That's what we talked about with Scott Fawcett, because again, it's like you can have all the dreams and goals you want, but if you can't get out of bed because you're sick or you're hurt, then we got issues. So it's right. So important, especially because our job is very physical. I mean, we're on our feet all day, we're walking, we're moving around, we're hitting shots, we're doing whatever. You've got to make sure that's in check.
No, for sure.
It's really good. All right. Do you want to dive into our teaching topics today?
Let's go the 180-degree flip.
We got a little flip. Yeah, we go from personal development to some actual teaching stuff. Yep. So I hope everybody's hung in there so far, and that didn't scare you away.
Yep.
We'll take a musical break.
You don't want to hear me sing. So the first thing that I have for us to discuss is, what are your least favorite swing characteristics and why? What do you absolutely hate to see in a golf swing?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think it was interesting. Me and Rob were talking a little bit about this at lunch. Is whether we like it or not. I mean, we know more about the golf swing and what the golf club does now through the information and research that everybody that we know has done. More than ever, right? So, I mean, we know what's going on, but everybody still has a preference, I think, of what they like to see in a golf swing.
Or don't like to see.
Yeah, I think it's I think we're just humans, right? So, whether we like it or not, we still teach some preferences. So I'd say my top couple would be, and we can kind of throw it around, is definitely the over-rotating club face in the takeaway backswing that leads to a very extended lead wrist at the top. Would be probably number one. I think that's one of the main swing wreckers, which face rotation and or a inside takeaway shaft being too flat, whatever you want to call it. I just see that, and that sort of leads into, I think, too much lateral sway, too much weight shift in the backswing. Would be my top two. Gotcha. Being a backswing, and then I'd say downswing would be, a hand path that goes out too soon, early transition, or I think one thing we were talking about with one of your students is the extra radial deviation of the lead wrist coming down, where guys are trying to hold the angle
late.
Yeah, and then tipping the shaft out and having no chance.
Not much of a chance.
Yeah, so that would be my top 3 or 4 there.
Some of the stuff that I'm look at each and every year, and a common denominator that I'm always trying to fight is and Jason already picked out all the ones that I look at. Of course, I'm a student of yours, so I'm always obviously looking at some of the similar stuff. But I always look at where the club face is at the top and where it is halfway down. Mm-hmm. And because if that club face is still open halfway down, you've got no chance but to extend lead wrist and somehow get these wrists to close the club face in an improper way. And I'm always trying to work on pivot, and if the club face is put there, you got no chance with any sort of pivot. So I'm always trying to get the club face to a certain point of some sort of square to closed. I can take a student that has a closed club face and we're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm better off there than with somebody who has an open club face as far as being able to work with their body a little bit more. I would say my number one was short game, and this is cool because this is what we talked a lot about with James is same sort of philosophy. He doesn't look at what good players do well. He looks at what poor players do poorly.
Sure.
And that was a cool way of thinking about it, and that's related to the question. And one of the things that I see a lot of in the short game is a closed backswing, a closed club face in the backswing, and from there you've got to make some sort of move that keeps the club face from closing and de-lofting the club. And so trying to actually get that club face to just naturally rotate open a little bit more in the backswing is something that I've been doing a lot of work with.
Isn't that interesting how that sort of goes backwards?
It's unbelievable, and I see it all the time with students that roll the club face open in a full swing, but then keep it dead shut in a pitch shot.
I think that it's because I've been guilty of it in the past. Like, so we can go into detail of what I used to teach 20 years ago and what I don't teach anymore, but how we always wanted to get the handle way forward, at address, and that tends to get that lead wrist flex too much. And I'm thinking that's got to have some contribution because everybody sort of thinks they need to do that. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I mean I think club face. And again, I'm not. I would never say I'm 100% club face guy.
Yeah.
There's different, right?
There's other pieces.
You've seen me go path first. Hundreds of times too. It depends on the player and how what's matching up and not matching up. But I tell you that club face tends to have a huge effect on the rest of the golf swing.
Yeah, big time.
A huge, big amount of time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What about
Seems
you,
like
Robbie?
Absolutely. Other than the ones that you guys have already,
I think I stole
said,
yours.
You did steal mine. Yeah. The big,
you got the short end of the stick going last.
One of the big ones, like Jason alluded to, obviously is increasing or keeping radial deviation in the lead wrist for too long in the downswing. Oftentimes, when that happens, it could also have some disastrous effects on the club face. Other than that, the one that I would also throw out is the arc width. Oftentimes, what we like to see is the distance between the mid-hands point and the center of the thorax increasing through impact, as opposed to getting narrower. And oftentimes that'll be shown in the elbow proximity. If the elbows aren't getting closer together through the ball, that oftentimes can have some issues with shaft pitch. If the elbows are too far apart, it could also keep the club face open. But oftentimes it has poor implications on low point and the actual flat spot. So James told me that I'm not allowed to say flat spot, but I'm going to say it because I think flat spot is a thing.
I like that.
If I can get that
Como would like that though.
Yeah, if I can get the elbow proximity closing through impact and the elbows extending through the shot, then oftentimes I can get a player to get that low point a little bit more in front of the ball and have a little bit flatter bottom of the swing, which a lot of golfers come into our tee asking for consistency, and to me, that is one of the biggest things that I look at. If that flat spot is very narrow and it's not very wide, then oftentimes they're going to have trouble with consistency. So that's the other one that I'll throw in there.
That supination of the lead arm,
right,
too, is like that. Like the rotation creates the extension, in my opinion.
Yes. So
right through impact.
So the three things that I like to look at as far as the arc width is what's the lead wrist sequence doing, what's the right arm sequence doing, and then what's the pivot doing. So with the response to the lead wrist, the two things that you need to have to get the arc width post-impact is a good unhinged pattern, meaning you want the lead wrist going towards ulnar deviation around P5-ish, And you also want to have that lead forearm supinating or rotating counterclockwise smoothly in through the release. So it's not going to be a very violent motion, but it's going to continue well past impact.
Not really holding on to it too, but
right.
Even the shut face guys are not holding on to
exactly.
it.
The second one that I'll say as far as arc width is the right arm and what that should be doing. Oftentimes players will use the internal rotation of the shoulder or the flexion of the trail wrist to close the club face. If I can get that elbow pit to face up for longer in the downswing and work more in front of the body, as well as keep some extension in that right wrist, that tends to really help to get that arc width past impact. The last thing I'll say is, as far as the pivot goes, is I want the golfer to have enough side bend and rotation coming into impact so that the direction of the elbows extending is, again, in front of the golf ball. If they have a whole lot of early extension and the pelvis goes in towards the ball, oftentimes that can disrupt what the right arm's trying to do.
Yep.
So
runs out of room.
Yep. That's one of the first things that you taught me in my internship is we talked about that right arm pivot relationship. And
exactly
that's helped me
right.
tremendously.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking about obsessed. I've been a bit obsessed with that trail arm, and Tyler Farrell and John Sinclair have helped us a lot with that that idea, and I think those are great. So, question number two.
Question number two is, as I pull it up here, what motions do you want all of your students to do and why? So it's actually a bit flipped from the first question, but interested to see what y'all's thoughts are.
It's a pretty broad, but I mean, again, we all have preferences, and as soon as we throw these out, then somebody can argue the other side that this is something else can work. But I would say number one, going back to wrist angles, is I'm not obsessed with everybody having a flat lead wrist at the top. Okay, I don't really. Aside from, I only start changing that if I'm having trouble getting the player to square the face or close the face, or like you said, going into too much radial and extension with the lead wrist. Yes. So I would want all my players to be moving towards flexion with the lead wrist, and make sure I'm not dyslexic. Pronation.
Yes.
Yeah. So the lead forearm pronating.
Yep.
In early transition, and almost letting the wrist out a little bit, not trying to increase the lag, which will put the sweet spot behind the hand path.
Yes.
So that early transition, again, it goes back to training the hands and arms, educating the hands and arms of our players correctly. I think is super, super important. I would say the second thing would be, I don't see me ever wanting somebody to not get a relatively early pressure shift forward. I think most people probably, we're talking about average golfers here, probably need a little bit more lateral shift, early transition, because I'm seeing most of them are hanging back and then maybe rotating too early. So I think, and I definitely teach a lot less right side bend than I probably used to try to shallow the club. Like I said, if I can get their wrist angles and get the club face strong enough at the top, I can get them shallow enough, especially because for whatever reason lately I've been dealing with a lot of players with back pain. So I'm trying to eliminate as much right side bend shallowing pieces as I can, and getting their hand path to move down, and the wrist angles to change, and get the sweet spot back to where they can have a decent chance to get their torso to open up and stay relatively more level, I guess, and still get the pressure left, if that makes sense. So it takes a lot, especially when you got guys that have lower right back pain that and they're really trying to torque that right side and shallow it out. That could be definitely helpful and keep people playing pain free. I'll stop there for now. Let you guys go, and we'll steal all your answers.
I don't think I'm deep enough into my teachings to have something that I like every time. I have general things that I look for that I try and make sure that they're at least there. I draw what I call a cone of acceptance, which would be the shaft plane line and then the elbow plane, or slightly above the elbow plane. I just say, as long as you're somewhere in here, we can play golf.
In the downswing?
Yeah, in the downswing.
Yeah.
And I say, as long as we're in here somewhere, the hands are in there, the club's in there somewhere, we can play golf. And
Scott
so that's
Hamilton would like that.
Yeah. So
it's not a bad place to start.
And so that's just kind of a good starting point that I like to use most of my students on. As long as we're in there somewhere, we can start, and that'd be my starting point. And obviously, there's many ways that we can get there, and different ways to do it. But that would be my starting point, and that would be the one thing that I would say is consistent with all my students. Is that would be, you got to be in there.
That shape,
right? We got to be in that. We got to figure out that shape before we can move on anywhere else.
I like that.
All right. Well, because Jason stole my about the
thief.
shaft force.
Eventually, we're gonna let Robbie go first.
It's my show, man.
It is his show. Maybe one of these days I'll have my own show. But we'll see. So I'll kind of go to the short game side, and also it actually relates pretty well to putting as well. So whenever you get in a situation where you're trying to control distance, then you have to have control of the speed that the club head is hitting the golf ball at. So what some of our favorite golf researchers have found is that if you can have more of a coasting pattern through impact with your short irons and your wedges, then it's going to give you a better opportunity to do that. So basically what we're talking about is if you look at the rate that the pelvis and the torso is rotating approaching impact, you want that rate staying as constant as possible approaching impact. It's unreasonable to think that it's not going to go down some. It almost has to, but as much as you can limit the deceleration of the pelvis and the thorax approaching impact for wedges, I believe the better that you're going to be.
# go back and listen to John Sinclair's
That's right.
podcast. Yeah.
The other thing that also goes well with is the putting, which is something that I've learned from Jason, is that in order to best control speed, you want that putter coasting into impact. You don't want that thing over accelerating. You don't want it decelerating. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but you don't want it
almost
actually
impossible to achieve.
But either constant or slightly decreasing rate of acceleration through impact is going to give you a really good chance to control that speed.
Very good. Yeah.
I would say I had a student, and this is just because this was a lesson that I had about an hour and a half ago. I was one of the first students I've had in a very long time, if ever, that actually I do believe was decelerating by the time it was a huge backswing and then literally stopped right as soon as I hit the golf ball. So it was So it does happen, but it's very rare, and
much more common we see the over.
Yeah, we have to look more at the rate of acceleration as opposed to the fact that it is actually decelerating. The rate of acceleration is going down as opposed to the actual acceleration is going down.
Yeah. Very good. All right.
The last one I have is, what are you currently most interested in learning more about as it relates to golf coaching, and what resources are you using to find that information?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely, now that we're sort of digging more into biomechanics, and I'm just fascinated at 3D, and I haven't spent enough time learning to be like a super effective graph reader just because I haven't been around it, right? I haven't had the systems. I haven't, and I can get through it okay, but I want to get quicker at sort of recognizing and reading graphs. So the way I'm starting to learn that, just like John talked about, is because all I have is 4D, and we just have a few sensors, but I'm looking more at the students that we've had on 4D and the stuff that James gave us, because we got some good 3D stuff from James. Digging into that, and then honestly spending more time with John Sinclair and Tyler Farrell.
Time around that guy.
So John, because he's such a patient, guy that he's never gonna like talk down to you and say, hey, because I'm definitely weak in that area. I'm not afraid to say. So that's something that I want to get stronger at, because I want to start using more, the 3D systems and being quicker at it, where I can start testing my players a little bit more.
That's right. Measure.
Yep.
Not guess.
Oh man. I don't think that there's one thing right now. That's the only problem.
Okay,
Is
throw
I'm
a couple out.
I'm gonna let you go first, Robbie.
Okay.
I'll let you take one first.
So a lot of things that I've been experimenting with is how can I change the environment and what constraints can I afford the golfer to help bring about a desired movement change without necessarily giving them internal cues. And then resources, I find that I'm giving it at least a shot in the lesson, so the trial and error process is teaching me a lot about it.
Yeah, sure.
Oftentimes I've made the mistake in the past of not getting an idea of what their current concept is, and B, not giving them at least an opportunity to figure it out with some sort of simple constraint. And I've gone straight into saying, okay, well, you need to do this, 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 and this. Whereas now I feel like the progression for me in my lessons, which has actually been helpful because I find that the students leave having a bit clear concept of what they need to do is concept first. If the concept is good, then oftentimes I will give them a task or a game that I think will push them in the direction I need to go. And the failure of that task or game is a prerequisite to me introducing new internal cues to them. I've had quite a few lessons where they actually do figure it out because the game design and the task design I've done a good job with, and sometimes I will whiff and I'll create just a terrible task. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't work, so we're going to have to go back in and actually take a look at the motion and what do I need them to do differently. But the games-based, the constraints-led approach, I think, has merit. I think that it doesn't work for everybody, but you owe it to your students to at least give them a chance to explore.
So what type, I'm going to interrupt you here because I think that's a great insight into a type of teaching. So what type of player do you think that works with best, and what type of player doesn't it work with?
That's a good question. Because I think if you have a curious golfer, I think it can work really well. But if you have the golfer that comes in and just wants to know just doesn't care about the necessarily how to get there, he just says, okay, give me the answers I need to know now. Oftentimes, then you can get some lessons that go awry because they'll look at you and say, all right, and like, when are you going to tell me something? And I'm like,
right.
I want you the coaching side of me wants them to have that light bulb moment. But sometimes you have golfers who won't even look for the switch. So you have to have a golfer that embraces the feeling of failing and trying other ways, I think.
So it's the more analytical golfer that wants to know the why, or wants to know the how, I guess, more than anything. They want the specifics of the change.
Yes.
And then, because how many times do we get that response? Okay, I just hit it great, but I don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's an open opportunity to go, okay, well, I've got to give them something.
Right.
Even though maybe in our, as you as a coach, you may say, I don't really think you need it. Mm-hmm. That's a hard line right there because you're running the risk of losing them.
Right.
Right. So that's it's a tough one, man.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it isn't easy, but I mean, but you're right. So much of it's trial and error, and I think the things I'm most proud of watching you guys teach now, since you've been working with me for a year or so, is how much more thorough you are at the beginning of making sure that you're gathering all the information and sort of getting all the misconceptions and all the stuff before you start imparting what you want them to do or what you don't want them to do.
Yeah, watching your lesson this morning. I mean, it's you can go into that, but
tell me what you thought about it. Kind of set it up. That's not a bad place to finish here.
Well, if you don't ask the question, then you never know the answer, because this gentleman was absolutely raking the shaft. I mean, every shot. I mean, sometimes he hit a reverse shank on the other side of the hosel. And so
we had marks on the ferrule, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Right?
We did.
Yeah.
And so if you don't ask this question, then you never know that he actually thought that he was hitting it on the toe.
It's crazy.
And after that got out of the way, then now the coach and the player are at least on the same page, and now the things that the coach is going to tell the player make sense as to why they're asking them to do that.
It happens, man. Like,
I don't ever assume anymore.
So, I know that's the thing.
Right?
Somebody told me a similar story about that, like maybe a year ago, and since then I'm like, do you know what part of the club you're hitting? And it makes I don't want to insult them to think I'm not insulting their intelligence. I just want to make sure that you're hitting it on the heel and not the end of the golf club, because some of them and it's gone the other way sometimes. They've realized that it's actually not the toe, it's the heel.
This guy, and he's such a great guy. And he's the kind of guy. He's a good learner, but almost too good because he doesn't want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I asked him, like, if I had to ask you what part of the club are you contacting the ball, what do you say? He goes, I have no idea. I go, well, all right, let me rephrase that. I said, if I gave you $1 million to guess.
I love that one.
Right?
Yeah.
What would you say? And he goes, I would say I was hitting it on the end of the club.
Yeah.
Which is why he kept getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
He kept throwing it harder and harder with his trail arm.
Yep.
And he kept getting wider and wider. And So, but the other interesting thing about that lesson was, when I asked him, the other important question is, what are you trying to do? Mm-hmm. He said, I'm trying to get my hands closer to me coming down, which is absolutely the right concept.
Yep.
But then when I showed him the video and then showed him the TrackMan numbers, he's like, oh my God. I'm like, if we're America, you're Africa, right? I mean, it's like we weren't even close. So that bridge between feel and real was very, very large. Yep. But I could get it closer very quickly now that he knew, one, what he was doing, where he was hitting the ball on the club base, and then I had to create that feel. So I moved him around, gave him some external obstructions.
Put some constraints out there.
There's some constraints going on. And it was 20 minutes, and I'll post. I'm actually going to post. I'll post it on Instagram today.
Dramatic.
It was literally 20 minutes, and we got it back in the middle of the club face, and he was hitting it towards the target, which is nice. So, that's awesome.
All right. I just have one thing. So coming back to me, so couldn't really think of just one thing in swing that I'm currently working on, but I'm working on a personal development. That's my fear of failure.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to be working on coming up. I'm going to put myself into situations that allow me to fail or almost force me to fail to try and
so you want to share?
improve.
You want to share with any of that with us? So like, do you have some things you're going to start doing?
Nothing right now that I have that's worth sharing.
Okay.
So my friend Trevor Reagan, who runs a motor learning site that is really good. The actual name of it, it's if you look up Trevor Reagan, you'll find it. I cannot believe that I'm just spacing out. Google it. Google Trevor Reagan. But he has a great analogy where you have two tigers. You have one tiger that grew up in the jungle, and you have another tiger that grew up in a cage.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah.
And which one do you think, if you throw them out, is gonna survive? The jungle tiger, because he's been in the fire. He has experienced it. Whereas the jungle tiger is in a nice, safe environment. Nothing is giving him any discomfort. But so many golfers go out and practice in the cage. They practice, and so many people live their lives in the cage. They live their lives fearing failure and not putting themselves out in the environment to where they can grow.
Yeah. So I see that in my own teachings and in my own programs that I'm running is I find myself getting in a rut where I do the same thing over and over because it works. It's like, okay, well, I have success with this. I don't want to try something new and risk of failing. And so that's what I'm trying to – I would say I'm going to put first effort into a lot of the junior programs, just trying new things, getting out there. I mean, and it's a dumb fear to have in our junior program because it's like impossible to fail here at Carmel. We've got such a good junior program, and the people around are just phenomenal. But that's going to be probably first step in my own personal development there.
I love it. Well, I'm so proud of you guys. You guys make it all work, and you make me look good.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate you guys coming on. So we'll leave them with that. Failure is an event, not a person.
Nope.
Okay, so always remember that. And then we always leave everybody with study, practice, teach. Right? What's that mean, right? So when we say that, study, do your homework. Like you said, if you've got a goal, right, and you want to learn more about something, go find more about that. Find a person that's an expert in it. Go read a book. Look at a YouTube video. It's all over the internet, and then put it into practice. Right? Try it in your lessons. Keep some notes. Do a journal of, hey, this worked, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? Right? So figure out what's gonna stay and what's gonna be discarded, and then teach, which means share it with somebody else. And that's the biggest, I think the biggest kick that I get out of personal development is when I learn something new, I get to share it with you guys.
That's
Yeah.
right.
All right.
That's awesome.
My plug for Trevor is Train Ugly.
There you go.
Train-
Yeah. That's
Train
actually,
ugly.
I think I saw that on
Like that.
on Facebook.
So sorry, Trevor.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. All
Throwing
right.
plug.
So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you for having us.
I'm sure I'll throw an outro on here, but this is a great place to stop.
Yep.
And let me know how we can do better, or how I can do better with the show. You can email the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com, and we will keep answering questions. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.